more than 3 decades in the fields of research, communication, and community development. She holds an MS in International Policy from Stanford University and a BSFS from Georgetown University. She's the author of 2 books, About This Man Called Ali in 2009, which was named the first biography of a modern Arab artist by the renowned historian Philip Mansell. Her current and most recent book, This Arab Life, Generation's Journey into Silence, which was published last year, is an honest and intimate memoir that delves into the exploration of a rising Arab generation's descent into silence and anticipates the region's present-day chaos. It begins in Amman in the summer of 1973 and concludes in Beirut in December 2021. So I hope everybody can see the book. It's right here. So without further ado, please, Amal and Raja, do start. And I wish everyone a very pleasant evening with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Rana. Thank you for this. I mean, Raja Shehadeh needs no introduction, I'm sure. He's one of Palestine's most celebrated sons. In 1979, he founded Al-Haq, the leading human rights organization in the occupied Palestinian territories, and set out to defend Palestinians and their land and property against Israeli conquest and occupation. He did that as he devoted his writing, of course, to narrating and documenting the myriad meanings of living under that occupation. Raja has carved such a literary presence in this space that he's been hailed as the chronicler of Palestine. His works span decades and include Strangers in the House, Coming of Age in Occupied Palestine, When the Bulbul Stopped Singing, Life in Ramallah Under Siege, Palestinian Walks, Notes on a Vanishing Landscape, Going Home, A Walk Through 50 Years of Occupation, and of course, We Could Have Been Friends, My Father and I, a stunning memoir, I have to say, of a father and son's relationship that unfolds through the history of a cause sacred to both men, Palestine. Raja, welcome. It is an absolute pleasure to have you with us today. Can I start, if I may, by inviting you to read from an early key excerpt from the book about Israel's publication in 1984 of the map of the regional road plan number 50, and your immediate realization that Israel was creating the foundations for the annexation of the occupied territories. Please, go ahead.
Thank you, Amal, for this wonderful introduction. And I'm greatly looking forward to this talk between us. I'm going to read from the very beginning of We Could Have Been Friends, My Father and I, and it will not be a long reading. I could hear him entering the office with his usual gusto. As always, I took a deep breath when my father came in. He stopped at the reception to get the latest messages, then asked, "Has anyone called?" With small, quick steps thumping the ground, he walked past my room, followed by his secretary, to whom he was already dictating letters concerning the day's court hearings. He was wearing a dark suit with a well-ironed white shirt and a black tie, and carrying his heavy black leather briefcase. Then he doubled back and peered through the open door to my room. He saw me looking over a map covered in cobweb lines and asked accusingly, "What are you doing? Don't you have any work to do?" Before I could explain, he had darted into his office to resume dictating. I stayed in my office examining the new 1984 military order plus the attached map that my father had seen me with. Road Plan number 50, as it was designated, was a blueprint for the Israeli Occupation Authority's long-term objective of creating a new West Bank road network that was bound to have a devastating effect on the Palestinian landscape, on traditional towns and villages and agricultural areas. Studying it, I could see where future roads were to be built, how the existing network of roads was to be altered from north-south to east-west grid, and how the Jordan Valley was to get a new road, one that would better connect it to Israel and consolidate it as the country's eastern border. The implications were massive. I gave my father time to finish dictating his letters. Then I walked over to his office to show him the new order and map, which had only arrived in the post that day. When I suggested to him that we should submit objections to the proposal, he was not enthusiastic. He didn't seem to share my sense of foreboding about the impact that the order would have on the land. The phone rang and he answered, "Aziz Shehadeh here. How can I help you?" Waving me away, he sank into a conversation with his client. But I continued to think about the new road plan. A few weeks earlier, I had taken a solitary drive down what we then called the Latroon Road, since it linked the hilly town of Ramallah to the coastal city of Jaffa via the Latroon Monastery. On both sides of the road, I could see terraced hills dotted with olive trees in full leaf. The trees on the slopes of these undulating hills were all approximately the same height, and they were all olives. As I drove northwest, the hills were awash with sunlight, and the trees cast their shadows over the brown earth all the way down to the wadi. On the hill to my right was a plot that belonged to my client. He had just heard that the occupation authorities had expropriated it and were planning to establish Beit Horon and settle it with Israeli Jews. I couldn't understand why. What was the point of putting Israeli civilians in the midst of our hills, so close to a Palestinian village? How would these settlers get their electricity and water? They couldn't depend on the inadequate services from the nearby village. Could they probably have planned for an alternative infrastructure? It was then that the worrying thought struck me like lightning. What if our Israeli occupiers, who already had total control of the networks serving us, were proposing to construct a superior network for water, electricity, and roads connecting the settlements to Israel? That would mean they could cut us off without affecting their own people. We would be completely at their mercy for essential services. When I saw the military order announcing the new road plan, I feared that the Israeli military was taking the first step to prepare the way for this eventuality.
Thank you for this, Raja. Before I start with the first question by asking you what happened to this plan, I just would like to tell our audience that if they would like to ask questions, to put them in the chat, and I'll try my best to accommodate them. So what happened to the plan, Raja?
Oh, the plan was devastating. It took years to implement it, but eventually they did. And now the roads are exactly what I said, exactly what I had thought would happen. We are now in the ghettos, and they are connected to each other and to Israel through highways that we are not allowed to use. One extreme example of this was Hebron. In Hebron, they were going to make expand the Jewish presence. And my thought then was, how are they going to live as a ghetto inside Hebron, which has over 200,000 Palestinians, and they are only a few hundred? And I thought they were crazy to be wanting to live in old city of Hebron in a ghetto. As it turned out, they connected this ghetto with Israel through highways and through building a road underneath Beit Jala in tunnels. And now it's possible to get to Hebron from Jerusalem in a few minutes. And we are living, these people in Hebron are living in a ghetto, in a big ghetto, and they are living in areas that are open to Israel and to each other. So it was a terrible calamity. And of course, in the process, they destroyed so many of the hills, because they wanted to build roads that reached Israel in the closest, shortest amount of time. And so they built straight roads and did not take into consideration the landscape and the way the hills are, and they just cut through and destroyed and destroyed and destroyed.
Fascinating. I mean, in those, in fact, first 10 pages of the book you lay out the essence of the memoir, much like a stage set. We have, the Palestinian struggle takes clear shape. The main protagonists make their appearance, and we catch the essential rhythms of your relationship with your father before he was murdered in 1985. And I have to mention here, it was not a politically motivated murder, as many had claimed. So it's a relationship really suffused with love, Raja, but a bit mystifying to you, marked by distance and silence. But reading the book, I sensed that the family life was difficult and hectic because of the conflict and because of your father's engagement with it. But I had the feeling of a close-knit family, a loving family. Your father and you shared a passion for Palestine. The law was the resistance of choice for both of you. You both embraced a peaceful resolution to the conflict and an independent Palestinian state next to the Israeli one. Can you elaborate a bit on what would make a relationship that had the makings of a great father and son bond struggle in this way?
Well, in the process of writing the book, I learned more about the relationship, and I learned more about my father, of course, and I learned more how close we were and how our paths crossed more ways than I realized. But this came through the writing of the book, and I think that when my father was alive, there were many problems between us, and mainly because I had not appreciated and not understood and not followed his achievements throughout his life. So, for example, he went into the Jafir, which was a terrible prison in the desert, for 2 months. When he came back, I don't remember the meeting. He was exiled for 27 months and had to stay outside in various places in London, in Rome, in Beirut. And when he came back, I don't remember the event of our meeting. And so this made me surprised. Why is it that I didn't remember? Why isn't it that I didn't appreciate? Why didn't I think of my father as a hero at that time when he was doing all these heroic things? And I realized partly it was because I had taken my mother's side, and my mother always blamed my father for being too active and too risk-taking. And I took her side and saw the negative aspects of his work. And so I didn't leave time for me to appreciate him. And it was really the writing of the book that became like a love letter to my father.
Yes, and what a love letter it is. I'm going to come to the juxtapositions that I think are just some of the literary, just an extraordinary literary device that you use in the book in a minute. But I wanted to ask you, was your choice to study English literature and philosophy at the American University of Beirut an act of, was it an attempt on your part to carve some kind of space for yourself, or were you always intending to do this before you went for your law degree after your bachelor's?
Well, thank you for asking these questions. A very good question, because from an early age, I was interested in writing, and I always thought I will be a writer and wanted to be a writer and was interested in literature. And it so happened that English literature was what I enjoyed more and read more. And maybe it was to do with my education, but it was always English literature and English writing that I did from the very beginning. And so I thought that I wanted to study literature, English literature, because I thought it would help me in the writing. Of course, it doesn't really, but I thought it might. And at the same time, I didn't want to be dependent on my writing for my living, because I thought then I would be forced to write what the market wants, and that would limit me. And at the same time, my father, of course, wanted me to be a lawyer and come and join him. And I thought of my father as the real thing. He was the real thing, and I wanted to be the real thing. And writing was something important for me, but not the real thing somehow. And so I always wanted to study law, but before studying law, I wanted to study literature. And after I finished literature, I went into law.
Fascinating. There is I mean, the reason why I asked this is because, you know, in lamenting the unanticipated loss of your father, you say that growing up, you dreamed about becoming close to him later on in life, that you thought, and this is how you put it, and you put it beautifully, I thought I would have time for the rebellion and the dream. And then, of course, he dies in 1985, and you are not given the opportunity to grow closer to your father. I thought that was quite affecting. But I again found especially gripping the juxtapositions between family members and friends, which mirror society-wide dilemmas and debates in the Palestinian experience. I mean, those who stayed in what became Israel in 1948, and those who left, those who managed to overcome material loss, and those who never recovered, and those who saw hope in the fight for self-determination and an independent Palestinian state, and those who thought it was all futile. And you map them out so well. We have, you know, Boulos, your paternal grandfather, and his brother Salim. We have Aziz, your father, and his half-brother Fuad. We have Aziz and your mother. And we have a fascinating juxtaposition that reveals itself in the conversation in 1972, 5 years after the 1967 war between Aziz and Nimr Hawari, an old colleague and comrade, if you like, of your father's. So I wanted to, and perhaps we can give some background about this conversation later, but were the juxtapositions a deliberate literary device to illuminate the larger realities, or just the way the narrative came together through your storytelling, Raja?
No, I think it was intentional, because I thought that in order to portray my father properly, I had to show his negative, his opposite. And at the same time, one of the incentives for writing the book was that I wanted to write about the Nakba. And the Nakba is at the heart of all of this. And the Nakba is something that I thought has been written about, but never in a way that really evoked it. And the way I try to do it is through writing about my father's and mother's life in Jaffa, in order to show how great the loss was. And I thought that through that, then the reader can associate with the experience. But the Nakba has affected everybody in Palestine. It's an open wound. And so there's no one who isn't affected by the Nakba, but different people reacted differently. So before the Nakba in 448, Boulos and Salim were entirely different people. Boulos was a political person, and he was an editor of the Markaz Sharq, of course, so that's very political. And so he constantly was involved in politics, and Salim was a judge under the British mandate in Palestine, in Jaffa, and he always said, I have enough troubles of my own, I'm not going to be involved in politics. And he thought that as a judge, he couldn't take sides and he couldn't be involved in politics. And so I grew up with that image of the two people entirely different. But then there were other people in my life who also chose. So there were my cousins and aunt who stayed in Akka, couldn't leave, and they had a very hard time, and we could only see them once a year at most, at best, when they came through for Christmas. And I grew up not knowing about their life and never being close to them, because they were living so far away. But they were affected very much by the Nakba, and like us as well. And so everyone has been affected by the Nakba and continues to be affected by the Nakba, and it will be an open wound until it is recognized and until the right of return is recognized. And that is the problem of all the Palestinians, and that is the problem of Israel, which Israel is unaware that it has to resolve in order to make peace. If ever peace is going to become, it has to be based on recognition of the Nakba and the right of return.
Which makes the juxtapositions all the more interesting, really, because, I mean, if there's one revelation in them, for me, it was the loneliness of your father's quest for an independent Palestinian state. I mean, if you take a look at the family members, your Uncle Salim, his Uncle Salim, your Uncle Fuad, Nimr Hawari, they all thought it was futile. Your mother thought it was futile. That Israel would not, under any circumstance, agree to an independent Palestinian state right from the start. So there seems to be a bit of a paradox also, Raja, because you mention and you state very clearly, in fact, that your father, and I'm quoting here, understood as early as 1936 what Zionism was about. And point of fact, he wrote the definitive booklet on it. It's called The ABC of the Arab Case in 1936. So what would give him hope and confidence that his efforts would in any way bear fruit when he knew that the odds were so well stacked against him?
Well, at first he didn't know. He had great faith that he would succeed. And he thought that the time was right immediately after 67, because then the Israelis were worried, and seriously worried, about the fact that there were over 1 million Palestinians who have now come under their control. And they were worried that they would not be able to control them. And it would disrupt the whole of the life of Israel, because they would be, they were worried about that. And in the Arab world, which always stood against the Palestinians for the establishment of a Palestinian state, although they always say otherwise, he thought that because of the defeat in the 67 war, they were stunned, and it was good timing to project this new initiative, and it could succeed. And he worked very, very hard to make it succeed. But then, of course, Israel did not want it. Israel did not want it. And he didn't know that Israel did not want it so much. And now I know, because the archives reveal how Israel was always using the initiative to put one side against the other and so on. But he believed very strongly that he could succeed, and he did everything he could to make it succeed.
In point of fact, you suggest in the book that it is in many ways, his extraordinary legal victories against Israel that perhaps gave him hope that the law might be the most effective way to deliver a solution for the Palestinians. And there is one legal victory that is really unbeknownst to many of us, that I thought was really just astounding, and that's the victory that he achieved in the Palestinian accounts that were blocked by Israel in the aftermath of 1948. I wonder if you might just take a couple of minutes to talk to us about this case, because it really, first of all, it was a remarkable feat on the part of your father, and it went very far in showing the Israeli strategy, and you call it, I think, appropriately, no money, no country a strategy that they had, and how your father was able to create a dent in that strategy. Could you just give us a brief idea about the case in a couple of minutes, Raja?
Yes, thank you. The case was that the Palestinian pound was equal to its pound sterling, and just before the 48 war, Britain stopped that association between the pound and the sterling. And then Israel decided that all the accounts in Israeli banks, of foreign banks, the Arab Bank and the Barclays Bank, Palestinians could not withdraw their money from these accounts. So they blocked these accounts. And that meant that the people who left Palestine because they were forced to leave and lived in Lebanon, in Cyprus, in Jordan, in the West, who were trying to draw their money from their accounts, couldn't. And so the Arab Bank raised a case against Israel in London to help make them unblock the accounts, and the case failed. The court in London refused to give them any relief. So my father decided to raise a case in Jordan against Israel, against the Barclays Bank for the blocked accounts, and he succeeded. And the Barclays Bank had to pay the money to the clients. And once that happened, all the other banks had to do the same, and the Palestinians who were destitute without their money were able to get their money. And that was a great achievement. This was in 1954.
Remarkable. I mean, it was just something, and you know, it was just astounding to me that so few of us really know about this case. But you know, in the end, such victories couldn't possibly outweigh the bigger national losses, unfortunately. And again, there are several key moments in the book that really kind of illuminate the entire struggle. In one, you say the experiential gap between zealous Jewish fighters and unsuspecting Palestinians in 1948, a gap that you say lasted well after 1967. And it just struck me, why would the Palestinians continue to be so unsuspecting, Raja, when they had such an intimate and continuous encounter with Zionism and its plans? Why would they remain so unsuspecting?
A very good question, but then you have to remember that World War II happened in Europe and in the whole world, but in Jaffa and in the Palestine, it was a time of, they didn't experience the war. They had actually, the economy was very good in Palestine at that time. And in Europe, the fighters who were some Jewish fighters had been involved in the fighting and were brutalized by what they saw. And the Jews, of course, were brutalized by the actions taken against them by the Nazis and by the, I read Timothy Snyder, Bloodlands, and it is such a horrible suffering that the people in these Baltic states suffered during the World War II. And I don't think the Palestinians were fully aware of that. We're not aware of the brutalization that had occurred to these people who were coming to fight in Palestine, who were ready to do anything. And they ended up doing anything. They did massacres, they threw people out of their homes and destroyed their homes, and so on. And then in 67, the failure of imagination was also there, because all of us, including myself, could not imagine that the Israelis would be successful in building settlements, whole cities and towns in these hills, which we saw as remote and unreachable and uninhabitable. And so I remember once I was driving to Tel Aviv to attend a court case, and on the way I saw a truck carrying mobile homes. And these mobile homes were driving to a plot of land on the way to Tel Aviv in the West Bank. And on the way back, I saw that the land, which was empty, had now 5 mobile homes on it, the beginning of a settlement. And I thought, what is built so easily can be destroyed so easily, can be removed so easily. And I didn't have the imagination to realize that it is possible for them to build highways, to build huge cities, as they did in the West Bank. And they did, and it was my failure of imagination. For us, building a house takes a whole year. It's a very slow process. For them, they use these amazing abilities and money. Of course, money is behind it, and built huge tracts of land, all built up, and destroyed our hills in the process.
So, I mean, you become, in fact, a chronicler of this Israeli zeal and its effects on Palestinian land and people, and you become really actually a chronicler of the Palestinian failure of imagination, as you call it. But I mean, would you say that your books, from Strangers in the House to Going Home, a walk through 50 years of occupation, are their own kind of validation of your Uncle Salim and Fuad and Nimr Hawari's insistence that all is doomed, as Fuad once said to your father? I mean, do you consider your writings, your books, are a validation of this view?
On the contrary, I think that the most important thing against colonization is to be aware and to be open-eyed and to know what is happening to you and how it's happening. And so throughout my books, whether the legal books or the literary books, I have been documenting and showing the Israeli methods and how they have worked to deprive us of our land and to change the life of the place and so on. And I think that through being open-eyed and being aware, the colonizer cannot succeed, because the colonizer can succeed only if we're mystified, if we suddenly wake up and see all the changes and say, how did this come about? We don't know how it came about. We were mystified. And my books, I think, help demystify this and show that the process was slow and deliberate and how it happened, and there's no mystery about it whatsoever. And I always think that there is always a way out.
Okay, so I mean, we're going to, move closer to contemporary times, but there's again a juxtaposition here, because in Palestinian Walks you write, the truth is that we had been defeated. For now, the Israeli policies had succeeded, and I had wasted many years working on an area of law and human rights that came to nothing. And in fact, in the memoir, you quote your Uncle Fuad telling a woman friend, you and your children might be able to get buried in Palestine, but for sure your grandchildren will not have a place in Palestine even to be buried. No Palestinian will be left there, and the land will have been taken. I mean, this I juxtapose against probably one of the most extraordinary moments in the memoir, as it was no doubt in your life, when you realized that you and your father had used the same pen name to sign many of the letters, Samid. You didn't know it, and he didn't know it either. And Samid, of course, means that who is steadfast, or the one who perseveres, as you translated in your book. And in the end, that's what it has always been about in the Palestinian experience, sumud. But you have this chronicle of vanishing landscapes and what you said in Palestinian Walks, and you have this never-ending sumud. I don't think there's really a paradox there. I think it's just a real, very tragic and hopeful dialectic at the same time. So how do you walk with this into the future, Raja, now that we're entering what seems to be an unpredictable phase in this conflict?
Well, the reason why I said I wasted time in my law and so on is that the Oslo Accords, when they were signed, and I saw how they had not taken into account any of the work that I had done and Al-Haq had done in delineating and describing the changes in the law, and rather than try and revoke these, and they built on them and allowed Israel to build on them and allowed Israel to get away with the violations of international law and the structures of the occupation that they had put together. And that was when I decided that I'm not going to waste more time in doing the same old work and continuing with that, and I will move on to literary work. And that was actually a very important thing for me, because it was, before that, I was doing work on human rights almost full-time, work in the office almost full-time, and writing at the same time, and did a number of books, but it was very difficult. And I think good writing requires time. And I didn't have the time to do good writing. And after the Oslo Accords, I decided that I'm not going to waste time with the futile attempts at impacting the way things are in the politics, and I will concentrate on my writing. And that was what I did, and that was what gave me hope, because I was able to achieve much more than I had done before.
But I mean, Al-Haq continues, and it continues to succeed. And would you, I mean, and Israel, in fact, recently declared it a terrorist organization, didn't it? And deemed it illegal. I have the suspicion that you consider this a major achievement.
Well, Al-Haq is a major achievement indeed, and it has done a tremendous amount of work. And now
No,
it has...
I mean also that Israel felt worried enough to declare you a terrorist organization. I mean, when Israel does something like this, it means it must be very worried.
Yeah, absolutely. And the great worry was because Al-Haq was working with the International Criminal Court on making a case against Israel. And Israel is definitely worried about that and wanted to stop Al-Haq from that work by declaring it a terrorist organization, stopping its funding and so on. And that is definitely, yes, an indication that Israel is worried, and that is something that we should be proud of, that we have made an organization that worries Israel and that has an impact so much so that it brings Israel to declare it as a terrorist organization, and not accepted. This designation was not accepted by European countries, and they all accepted that there's no evidence, and they will continue working with Al-Haq and accepting its work and so on. So that is, I think, yes, a great achievement.
Absolutely. And let me just ask you then something about your writing. I have a question here from Katie. So she's asking, she would love to hear from you about your movement across genres. How do you make decisions about what kind of container is most appropriate for the ideas you're exploring on a particular project?
Well, all my writing has been nonfiction, and I've always thought of my writing, literary writing, as an exploration of self. And so in every case, I explore different aspects of myself and feel that I get closer to understanding myself better and therefore achieving freedom, more freedom. And so each case, I have to see how best to do that. In the case of Going Home, it was through exploring one day only of life in Ramallah, and how through the day I go into the old houses where I lived, and experiences come and I describe them. And then I had also an encounter with imagined encounter with my father in our house on the way and then I go into the different aspects of the life and politics and so on, all in order to understand better what I am and where I am and so on. And at the end, I found the best way to do it. It was through one day, the description of one day, and I did that in Going Home. In the case of sorry.
No, please go ahead.
And in the case of Palestinian walks, I did it through 6 walks in the hills, and each walk had a different part of the West Bank, and each walk had a description of the land and a description of, for example, my attempts at saving the land through the law and so on. And so I found that the walking in the land and describing the walks was the best way of achieving what I wanted to do, which was to describe what was happening to the land and how it's vanishing because of the settlements and the destruction that they are bringing.
So if you were to begin writing again now about Palestine today, the occupied territories today, how would you start it? What's like? I mean, just what's life like there now, Raja?
Well, you know, it has become much more brutal, and in a way, what we have been anticipating and seeing coming has come, and the settlements are much more brutal, much more antagonistic towards their neighbors and all the people living next to them, and they are adamant on not accepting anyone except Jews living on the land. And so they are not in a mood. they are the product of an education and of increased religiosity, which tells them that all this land of Greater Israel belongs to Israel, and the Palestinians are not, and they don't recognize the Palestinians, and they don't recognize the existence of Palestinians on the land. And so there's no room in their mind for compromise. But then, of course, the settlements and the settlers and the people who live in that way are not necessarily all of Israel. And they have, because they are committed and worked very hard, they took over the government. And the others have not taken over the government. And now with the protests in Israel, they're beginning to realize that the settlements have been the cause of so much trouble, and the way the deterioration in the system and the law enforcement and so on was also due to the settlements. And the beginning of this realization is hopeful, but it's not yet matured.
So, I mean, I don't think there's any failure of Palestinian imagination today, is there? I mean, I think the Palestinians are very well aware of what they are going to be experiencing in the future. I mean, I don't think there's any kind of illusion about what is going to transpire in the future, right?
You can say that, but you can also say that the Palestinians are now shielding themselves, protecting themselves from realizing the worst. Because if you open yourself up to realizing the worst, then you live in a nightmare. Because what is happening or could be happening is another Nakba, another forcing out of Palestinians from the land. But people don't live with that fear all the time on their mind. They realize it in part of their mind, but meanwhile, they are living normal lives as much as possible and trying to make do with what they have and with the so on. So you could say it's a failure of imagination to realize what is coming, and yet it is a way of preserving themselves and of continuing.
Can you call it sumud, a form of sumud?
Yes, it is a form of sumud, because by staying on the land despite all the difficulties, by enduring all the blockages of the road, and by enduring all the permits that are required for life here, and by continuing to build and create businesses and education and so on, then they are acting sumud. Yes, this is sumud, obviously. Yes.
And organizations like Al-Haq and its collaborations with different human rights organizations, including those in Israel, for example, B'Tselem. I have a question here from Brett about the relationship between Al-Haq and B'Tselem. I mean, this is also a rather recent trend that has kind of changed the political topography of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. These kinds of non-governmental collaborations across borders. Is that the right way of saying? Is this a source of hope for you, for example?
No, I don't think so, because it's a very small kind of collaboration. And in the case of B'Tselem, the collaboration started when the organization was established in 1988, because it was going to do work that was similar to Al-Haq's, and Al-Haq agreed that they will coordinate and accept to cooperate with B'Tselem. But I don't think we can elaborate on this and say that because there is a collaboration between Al-Haq and B'Tselem and other organizations of equal, of similar, with similar objectives, then this is a new trend or something. No, it's not true. That's not happening, unfortunately.
Raja, when I finished reading the memoir, it felt complete to me. I mean, I had the sense that if you were to open the boxes that contained your father's private papers and legal files, say 15 years ago, and read them, you wouldn't have been able to write this memoir. Did I read this correctly?
I think, yes, you did, because I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to face so many things. I wasn't yet aware of so many things. I wasn't aware of his history enough. I had to do a lot of reading in history in order to do it. And I wasn't mature enough to understand my father, and whose ideas were well advanced and needed maturity to understand them. So yes, you're right. I wouldn't have.
In the interview, and I'd like to close with this and really give you the last few minutes to share with us your thoughts. At the end of the book, you have an imagined conversation with your father. Are you listening now? You imagine him asking, "Yes, no, I am," you answer. So if I may intrude on this conversation, a few minutes down that back and forth, what do you think your father most wants to tell you today, and what would you really want to tell him?
Well, I think he wants to tell me that it's important not to fall into the trap of accepting things for what they are and thinking of them as permanent, because Israel is trying to say that this is it. We have vanquished you, and we have established facts on the ground, and we have established the fact that the occupation doesn't even exist, and you have to accept that. And my father would say, no, don't accept that, because freedom is the most important thing, and freedom means that you insist on seeing things for what they are and understanding the history of things and the way they've come to be. And also, he would be wanting me to say and to hear him say that the possibility of peace between us, between the Israeli nation and the Palestinian nation, can bring so much good to both sides. And it's not an impossibility. And there was a time when Jews and Arabs lived together, and they did very well, because throughout history there was Jews and Arabs in Palestine. And so he was a great believer of the merits of reconciliation and peace, and he would want me to remember this and always keep it as an aim, something to aim to, and an objective that is not impossible to do and is worth working for.
And what would you tell him?
I would tell him that absolutely, I believe that. I absolutely believe that. And I absolutely believe that it's not, when people say that it's impossible to undo the settlements, and it's impossible to solve the problem by finding two-state solution and so on. I think that there's nothing impossible. There's nothing impossible, because what came to be illegally must be recognized as illegal, and we must rescind it, and we must work to end the occupation. And that is not something we can give up on ever, ever, ever.
Okay, so if we were to take a leap with our imagination, or rather you, I'm putting the entire burden on you here, Raja. And if you were to take us, if you could, 5 or 10 years from now into the future, if you were to paint me a worst case scenario, what would it be? And if you were to paint me a best case scenario, what would it be?
Well, a worst case scenario would be that somebody would come into Ramallah with a big explosive truck, and you can get into Ramallah with trucks easily and explode it and kill so many people and create havoc. And then people will start to run away, and maybe another Nakba. That would be the worst case scenario. The best case scenario is that there would be pressure, because Israel is not going to change unless there's international pressure. And pressure is coming because the economics in Israel is dependent on investments from the outside, and they might be coming less and less, as we can see already, because so many people are withdrawing their investments from Israel now. And the West and America and Europe, which has been adamantly pro-Israeli, might be changing because Israel is becoming too arrogant. So, for example, they refused entry to the head of the European Union recently, and they just said, no, you can't visit. And so the Zionist Jews in America are also getting very worried about Israel becoming a pariah state. And so all these forces, all these factors can make a change in Israel, and then there would be a possibility for a new life. Or there could be a big earthquake in the region, and the big earthquake can shake things up and make people realize that we are in one region and we have to care for each other, and we have to forget fights and so on, and work on working together.
I get a sense from you, Raja, that you think this is the more realistic scenario, and I certainly hope that it is. I have a question from your cousin, Suhail Nassar in London.
Mhm.
What is the use of the Palestinian Authority now? What have they accomplished other than being corrupt?
Well, the Palestinian Authority has been created as a result of the Oslo Accords, and they run the civilian aspects of the life here. And in some cases, they do well with the civilian aspects of the life. And Israel is relieved of having to pay for these civilian aspects of the life, because the Palestinian Authority is doing them and getting money from the outside and saving Israel from having to spend money on the Palestinians, as they are supposed to be doing under the international law. But the Palestinian Authority cannot be removed because it's not in its power to remove, and it's not going to be possible for the removal of the Palestinian Authority because of the way the things are set up, and unless
what about collapse? Can it not collapse on its own weight?
Israel will not allow it to collapse. Israel will not allow it, and the West will not allow it to collapse. That's something that we have to remember. Now, there can be elections and there can be better people running it, and that's a possibility. And the people running it now are not allowing for elections because they don't want to be replaced.
So what's your next book, Rera?
I'm doing one which we have just finished with my wife on memorials and lost memorials and monuments in the whole of Palestine. And we're visiting various places and writing about them.
And when is it going to come out, you think?
It will take, books take time to, as you know, to come out, another 2 years maybe. But we'll finish writing.
Well, I certainly look forward to reading them. We all are. Thank you so much, Raja, for this interview and this 1 hour of really a great conversation. It's a stunning memoir again. We could have been friends, my father and I, and you were indeed a stunning writer. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Amal. You were a great interviewer.
Thank you.
Well, I'll take it from you here, Amal, and I'd like to thank you both for a very engaging and very interesting conversation. This has been a pleasure and an honor to have you both, honestly. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. And if you like what you saw, please always come back and support us and contribute to us. We always love to have you here. Amal and Raja, please don't be strangers. We would love to have you all the time. And again, I mean, I just want to ask you, Amal, to show us the cover of Raja's book, just for people to have a visual. And I, in return, will put up your book over here, so people can please go and read these 2 books and support authors, both these authors and other authors. And thank you again, everyone. Have a very good evening, and we'll see you again next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, and good evening. Thanks.